So apparently, Game of Thrones has gone crazy. Like, absolutely balls to the walls crazy. I don't even watch the show. I just know what every other non-viewer knows. I know some of the actors involved. I know a few names, Winter is Coming, Dragons, etc. Seeing characters talk to Elmo about listening to each other basically tells me that getting characters to do that is probably rare enough to make it a good punchline. But seeing the vitriol for the show's final season has been magical. It feels like it overshadows the normal level of fans never being happy and sets a new bar. I almost wish I had arranged my previous 8 years of life better just so I could bask in this absurdity more efficiently. As of when I started writing this, the petition to have the final season of Game of Thrones redone with quote-unquote competent writers was at 225,000 signatures, and it was only 6 days old at the time. And bear in mind, The Last Jedi, which, if you look at YouTube, would make you think that every fan in the world hated it, only ever got 166,000 signatures on its biggest petition to strike it from official canon. Ever. For Game of Thrones to have surpassed that easily with this season is impressive. Very impressive. But what does it mean? Like, could the fans ever get what they want? And the thing is, who knows? HBO probably won't do it. They already have a prequel series in the works. It would hurt sales of the season they already produced and filmed on Blu-ray or digital to just announce they're remaking it. So it's probably not going to happen. But fans have gotten crazy things that they've asked for before. And welcome to my channel. This is an informal rant. May or may not be indicative of the channel going forward. I'm inspired by YouTubers such as Willie Versus and his Willie Will Figure It Out podcast. Finally just move forward and try my YouTube channel. So, apologies in advance for various fumbles I'll surely make. As for things fans have gotten, we're possibly getting a new RoboCop 2. We're getting a Ghostbusters 3. And we've already had a new Halloween 2 just called Halloween. Which is amazing because all these things have had reboots to one degree or another. The Halloween series had a reboot and a sequel to that reboot, as well as an original Part 2 and a Part 4 leading off from that. And now fans are getting sequels to movies from the 1980s and 1970s. Just straight up sequels. Just 40 years has passed. It's no big deal. So what would the redo of a series ending be? Has that sort of thing been done before? Yes. Anime fans know Neon Genesis Evangelion is famous for having a very divisive final 2 episodes. And those episodes led to Studio Gainax getting both praise and death threats from various fans. So much so that later they just made a movie to redo the final episodes. In tone and theme, it's very different than the final episodes of the show. It's full of giant robot fights and spectacle, scenes where they just show death threats and other fan letters they received. Could we ever get something like that for Game of Thrones? I don't know. It would be fascinating to see them just say, okay, here is another take on it, but what would happen? How do the fans know what they want? Because something like the end of Evangelion movie was also divisive. It's full of violence and painful, traumatic things for all the characters that the fans love, and it's potentially just made purposefully hurtful because the creators were upset from the reaction they got of fans telling them they did a bad job with the finale of the series. When Star Wars came back, it was relatively easy. I mean, obviously it was still a monumental task to get it done right, but the fans wanted the original trilogy, not the prequels. Bring in J.J. Abrams, a guy who is influenced heavily by the early work of Spielberg and Lucas, and he turns out a movie that is a love letter to the original trilogy. It's a good fit. The fans knew what they wanted. The company that was making it, Disney, knew what the fans wanted and gave it to them. And since then, it's been a struggle for them to find exactly what they want, because do the fans want to keep going back to that well, or do they want something different? And it's sort of a balancing act that isn't perfectly balanced yet. Now, for movies, the cycle of putting out a movie, selling it, moving on to the next movie is normal. So, getting sequels to the original movies for RoboCop and Ghostbusters, and disregarding the reboots that they already invested millions of dollars into is fine, because those reboots did not make enough money to justify giving them sequels. So moving on to an earlier version that will potentially earn them much more profit, yeah, that's just how things work. It's not really done with TV, though. TV is always a step-by-step thing, and once you've already made a season, it's too much of an investment in money and especially time for all actors and crew involved to ever just go back and redo it. You could make more, but this is the final season, and I assume everyone just dies. I don't know what Game of Thrones is. But it's not something you can course correct like a regular show where it's like, well, season 6 was bad. Season 7 will bring us back to form and bring back that old actor you love. No, this is the end of this series. They will course correct in any way they want with the prequel series, which will have a completely new batch of characters. I assume it's set thousands of years beforehand. I don't know how long these people live. But imagine if fans did get what they want. Would it be a bitter follow-up created by creators angry that their work was disparaged to begin with? Or would it be closer to something like the split in the American and Japanese timelines for the original Transformers cartoon, where to make the Japanese Headmaster series, they just say the final episodes of the American cartoon called Rebirth are just non-existent. That didn't happen. We're going a different direction with everyone involved. Characters are drastically different in origin and personality. Could we have Game of Thrones Legends, Game of Thrones alternate canon, Game of Thrones reboot canon? Could we get a entire reboot of the series at some point that follows the books as closely as possible once they're all actually out? Who knows? A Game of Thrones Brotherhood. I will say, if the fans really do want this, they're going to need to be more specific than quote-unquote competent writers, because that could go any number of directions. As of wrapping up this video, the final episode of Game of Thrones will be airing tomorrow. And while I won't be watching it, because I haven't watched the rest of the series, I'm going to be watching the Twitter and the YouTube and the Facebook to see the reaction to it, one way or the other. And I'm curious to see what fans will do after it is finally wrapped up. Will they move on? Will there be tons of fan fiction or fan works up to and including fan films? Maybe that petition will just keep getting bigger and bigger. Who knows? But I'm very curious to find out. Let's take one last look at that petition, and holy crap!